Since most of you don't know me, a few of you do, a lot of my stories sometimes, especially at the Story Slam, will have to do with my upbringing as a Mormon. I am no longer a Mormon, and this is a story from the time just right after I had made that transition out of theism generally. But I grew up a Mormon, and I did a year at Brigham Young University, and then I went and served a mission, and then I came back, and then a couple months after that decided that it wasn't for me, and the ball was already rolling. I was enrolled at BYU. I already had gotten everything ready. I already had an apartment. The whole thing was already on, so it was too late for me to not go to BYU for at least this year. Which is weird because it's a really strict Mormon school and they don't really take kindly to ex-Mormons being there. So I went, and for about a full year I was just kind of this undercover atheist at BYU, which was a fun adventure. One thing that you don't assume about Utah is that people really like it. Like, that's kind of the big shock that you get. Because on the one hand, Utah really sucks, and you have all those stereotypes about Utah being horrible and the beer being watery and all that stuff. And those are all true to an extent. But Utah is an awesome place. Salt Lake is a cool city, and the mountains are amazing. And so I got there, and there were a ton of people who grew up there in that culture and then left the church for whatever reason, but wanted to stay in Utah. And so there's just this whole hotbed of anarchists and punks and artists and really, really interesting, fun people who are kind of subversive and living under that whitewashed sheen that's on top that everyone assumes. And so while I was a student at BYU, at night and on weekends, I was just hanging out with the punks. I found this place called The Compound, which is just some dude's house. And he had punk shows just coming through, punk acts on their way, just, from San Francisco to wherever else, just punk bands who were crossing the mountains. They'd stop in Provo, and they'd play this house venue called The Compound. And big acts came in. I mean, No Bunny played there, Wet Hair played there. I smoked weed with the dudes from Bare Wires before they split up. You can listen to them now in Warm Soda. They just had an album this year. It's great. So big names in the garage punk underground. And they would just come in and play in this little living room, and it was a blast. So I didn't have, during the day, I had to pretend to be this certain way, and I had to be clean shaven, for example, because that's a rule at BYU, and I had to go around and just kind of play along with the game, and then at night I would just submerge into this crusty, grimy, vulgar, anarchist punk scene, and it was really, really cool because this really weird dichotomy. And if anybody had found me at one or the other, I would have been ostracized from both. You know what I mean? And so when I first got to Utah, before I found that, I was just so angry all the time. My first week, I was just this is the worst place. I hate it here. And I just was sick to my stomach because it was just such a gross place for me to be. And then when I found this compound, and I was really finding a place to be home. I was finding these people, and it was a really, really cool thing. And I remember very distinctly the first show I ever went. I don't remember the band. I don't remember any of the bands from that night, but one of them was this all-girl garage punk band, and their faces were painted with corpse paint, so it was all white and had the black death metal corpse paint. And I was this is cool. This is a cool place. And then I was hanging out after the show. They're yo, let's go to Beto's, which was the local 24-hour Mexican joint. And so we went to Beto's at 3 in the morning after this show on a Tuesday or something. And when we got there, we were noisy and drunk and rambunctious, and the girls still had the corpse paint on their faces. And there were a couple just total squares with their polo shirts buttoned up all the way, and they were we're going to seminary tomorrow or whatever, just the dweebiest BYU students. And we were in there being drunk and rambunctious and probably smelled like weed smoke. And while we were ordering and trying to figure out what to get and being loud punks, I remember hearing one of them say to the other one, he's come on man, let's go. And he's no, it's cool. And then we kept gotta get out of here. And so they like left. They felt so uncomfortable around us that they left. And I realized that was when I found those my people. It was one of my proudest moments in my life that I was so badass. I had found this place that I was scaring the squares out of the burrito place. They had to leave because of how cool I was. I felt really great about that. And so that's when I found this home, and I think of friends that I made there are still some of my closest friends, even though I moved about 2.5 years ago. So that's my really brief story about finding a place where I hypothetically didn't have to be wearing a mask and the girls had cool corpse paint.